My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stepped through the gilded doors of the Jade Palace, and I knew every billionaire in that room was waiting for me to shatter. 20 billion won. That's how much Korea's criminal elite had wagered on my humiliation tonight. I wasn't supposed to know about the bet. I wasn't supposed to hear the whispered odds as I passed the cloakroom, the cruel laughter hidden behind champagne flutes. But I did. And now, walking beside Chao Wang, the man whose empire I'd scrubbed floors for, whose secrets I'd kept while remaining invisible, I understood exactly what I was: entertainment for wolves in designer suits. The burgundy silk gown that clung to my body felt like armor I hadn't earned. The chandelier light caught every eye in the ballroom, and they all turned toward us. Toward me. Nola Moore. The black maid who dared to stand where queens were born, not made. Behind me, Chao's hand barely grazed the small of my back, a gesture so subtle it could have been mistaken for accident. But I felt the weight of it. The warning. The challenge. Don't break now, Nola. Not when they're all watching. For 3 years, I was a ghost. I moved through Mariah Tower like smoke, unseen, unheard, erased by my own efficiency. I knew which floors Chao Wang walked before his footsteps echoed. I knew how he took his coffee at 4 a.m. when insomnia turned him into something restless and dangerous. I knew the exact temperature he preferred his bathwater after closing deals that toppled governments. But he didn't know me. No one did. In Chao's world, a world carved from steel, blood, and backroom deals that redrew maps, people like me didn't exist. We were the machinery that kept empires running. Replaceable. Invisible. Beneath notice. Chao Wang himself was a different species entirely. They called him the architect because he didn't just build empires. He designed them with absolute precision, every brick a calculated risk, every alliance a chess move 3 years ahead. His expression was carved from ice, his eyes dark and unreadable. Terrible at admitting when something mattered more than winning. Worse at showing mercy. I'd watched him destroy men twice his size with nothing but a signature. And now? Now he'd asked me to be his wife. Not really, of course. Just for one night. Just for the Eclipse Summit, where Korea's most powerful families gathered to remind each other who owned what, and who owned whom. His rivals had been circling, treating women like interchangeable accessories, questioning whether the man who built kingdoms could even secure a queen. So he'd come to me, the invisible girl, the one person who knew all his secrets and kept her mouth shut. One night, Nola, he'd said, his voice low and dangerous in the dim light of his office. Pretend you belong to me. Pretend you're not afraid. But I was afraid. Because the moment I stepped into that gala on Chao Wang's arm, I stopped being invisible. And in a world where power is inherited and workers are dirt beneath Italian leather shoes, a black maid wearing a crown, even a false one, becomes a target. The whispers started the second we crossed the threshold. Is that his housekeeper? She cleans his toilets, and now she's wearing Valentino? 20 billion says she doesn't last an hour. I kept my chin level. Shoulders back. Madam Choi had drilled it into me during 3 days of brutal transformation. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. I learned to disappear at 14. Not the dramatic kind of disappearing, no running away, no grand escape. The quiet kind. The kind where you become so good at blending into wallpaper that people forget you have a heartbeat. By the time I turned 25, I'd perfected the art of being invisible. Mariah Tower, with its 73 floors of steel and glass piercing the Manhattan skyline, became my kingdom of shadows. I knew every corner, every hidden camera, every blind spot where the security feeds didn't reach. I knew which elevator Chao Wang took when he wanted to avoid his own security team, which stairwell he used when he needed to think, which window on the 68th floor he stood at when the weight of his empire pressed too hard against his chest. I was the ghost who kept his world spinning. 3 years I'd worked for him. 3 years of early mornings and late nights, of pressing his shirts until the creases could cut glass, of preparing his coffee exactly 4 minutes before he wanted it, of erasing my presence the moment he entered a room. The other staff called me the shadow behind my back, and they meant it as an insult. But I wore it like armor. Being invisible meant being safe. Being forgotten meant surviving. Chao Wang didn't forget things, though. He noticed everything, every misplaced document, every adjustment to his schedule, every temperature shift in a room. He built his empire on precision, on seeing what others missed. But me? I existed in his peripheral vision, always there, never quite in focus. A useful tool. Nothing more. I told myself I was content with that. Told myself that invisibility was freedom. But late at night, alone in my small room on the 42nd floor, I'd catch my reflection in the window and wonder who I'd become. A woman designed to be overlooked. A shadow without a body to cast it. It started 3 weeks before the Eclipse Summit, when I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd been replacing the towels in Chao's private bathroom, the one connected to his penthouse office, when voices drifted through the cracked door. Chao's voice, cold and measured as always. And another man's voice, thick with contempt and expensive cigars. The summit isn't just about deals anymore, Wang. It's about proving you belong. Your competitors are bringing their wives, their families. You're bringing what? Your reputation? Your bank account? The man laughed, a wet, ugly sound. Jae-sung Park is bringing his new bride, 22, former model. Exactly the kind of ornament these events demand. Minho Huang just announced his engagement to some tech heiress. And you? The great architect, showing up alone like some monk. It makes you look weak. Vulnerable. I don't need a woman to validate my position, Takashi. Chao's voice could have frozen nitrogen. No, but you need one to keep the wolves from your door. You know how this works. These men, they're sniffing for weakness. They see a man without a queen. They start wondering if he's capable of keeping an empire. They start treating women like interchangeable accessories, Wang, and they expect you to do the same. Show them you can't even secure a companion, and they'll assume you can't secure your territories either. I should have left. Should have finished my task and vanished like I always did. But something in Takashi's words hooked into me, kept me frozen behind that door. I'll handle it. Chao's words were final, dismissive. But Takashi wasn't done. Will you? Because I've heard rumors. Rumors that Park and the Huang brothers have a pool going. 20 billion won on whether you show up alone again. They're making you a joke. They're saying the architect can build empires but can't even find a date. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes violence. I'd slipped out before I could hear Chao's response, but the damage was done. I'd seen behind the curtain. I'd glimpsed the pressure crushing down on the man who supposedly felt nothing. 2 weeks passed. Nothing changed. I remained invisible. Chao remained ice. The world kept turning. Then came the night he called me to his office at 2 a.m. I'd been sleeping, or trying to, anyway, in my small room when my phone buzzed with his summons. My first thought was that I'd made a mistake. Forgotten something. Overstepped some invisible boundary. I dressed in my usual uniform, black pants, white button-down, hair pulled back so tight it made my scalp ache, and took the elevator up to the penthouse. My reflection in the mirrored walls showed exactly what I'd spent years cultivating, a woman designed to be overlooked. Chao was standing at his window when I entered, his back to me, silhouetted against the glittering sprawl of Manhattan. He didn't turn around. Close the door, Nola. I did. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silence. You've worked for me for 3 years. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes, sir. In that time, have I ever asked you for anything beyond your professional duties? My throat went dry. No, sir. Then understand that what I'm about to ask is unprecedented. He turned then, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not quite vulnerability, but close. A crack in the ice. I need you to be my guest at the Eclipse Summit. I blinked. Tried to process. Failed. Sir, I don't understand. You need me to serve at the event? I can coordinate with the... No. The word cut through my confusion like a blade. Not as staff. As my companion. My... He paused, and I watched him search for the word, watched him hate that he had to say it. My wife. For one night. The world tilted sideways. I must have swayed because suddenly he was there, his hand on my elbow, the first time he'd ever touched me deliberately, steadying me. His fingers were warm through the thin fabric of my shirt, and I realized with a shock that I'd never been this close to him before. Never seen the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, never noticed the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. I know how this sounds, he said, his voice lower now, almost gentle. Almost. But I need someone I can trust. Someone who understands discretion. Someone who won't see this as an opportunity to leverage something from me afterward. His jaw tightened. Everyone else in my world wants something. You've never asked for anything. Because I knew better than to want, I thought. Because wanting things got you hurt. Why me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Something flickered across his face. Because you're invisible, Nola. To them, you'll be the ultimate provocation. The help, elevated for a night. It will infuriate them. Distract them. And while they're busy being outraged, I'll close the deals that matter. He released my elbow, stepped back, became ice again. One night. You play the role convincingly, and afterward, you return to your life. I'll compensate you, of course. Name your price. I should have said no. Should have run. But standing there in his office at 2 a.m., with the city sprawled below us like a kingdom waiting to be claimed, I felt something dangerous unfurl in my chest. Not hope. I'd killed that years ago. But something close. Curiosity. Anger. The sudden, reckless desire to be seen. I don't want money, I heard myself say. His eyes narrowed. Then what? I want 3 days off afterward. Paid. And I want you to tell me the truth about why you really chose me. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, something that might have been a smile ghosted across his lips. Deal. But the truth comes after the summit. Assuming you survive it. That should have been my first warning. Madame Choi arrived the next morning like a storm in Chanel. She was 60, Korean, and carried herself with a kind of authority that made generals nervous. Chao had hired her to transform me, and she took one look at my uniform, my pulled-back hair, my scrubbed-clean face, and said, "We have 72 hours to turn a ghost into a queen. This will be unpleasant." She wasn't lying. The first day, she stripped away everything I'd built. Cut my hair, not short, but shaped, layered, given life. Taught me how to stand without apologizing for taking up space. Shoulders back, she snapped, wrapping my spine with a wooden ruler. Chin level. You're not begging for permission to exist, girl. You're announcing your presence. Posture is power. Remember that. The second day was worse. She brought in a team, makeup artists, stylists, a woman whose only job seemed to be teaching me how to walk in heels without looking like a newborn giraffe. "You're not." Shuffling to serve coffee, Madame Choi barked as I stumbled for the 15th time. "You're walking into a battlefield. Every step is a declaration. Every gesture is a weapon. These people will be looking for weakness. Don't give them any." By the third day, I didn't recognize myself. The woman in the mirror wore a deep burgundy silk gown that moved like water, hugging curves I didn't know I had. Her hair fell in soft waves around a face that had been sculpted with makeup into something both fierce and elegant. Her eyes, my eyes, looked different. Awake. Alive. "Better," Madame Choi said, circling me like a hawk. "But the dress and the face mean nothing if you don't believe it. So tell me, Nola Moore, who are you?" I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. I'm Chao Wang's." "No." She cut me off with a slash of her hand. "Wrong answer. You are not defined by him. You are not his maid, his employee, his convenient fiction. Tonight, you are a woman who brought Korea's criminal elite to their knees. You are dignity that refuses to break. You are power incarnate. Now say it." I took a breath, met my own eyes in the mirror. "I'm Nola Moore, and I'm done being invisible." Madame Choi's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Good. Now let's see if you can convince them." My hands wouldn't stop shaking as we pulled up to the Jade Palace, and I knew every billionaire in that room was waiting for me to shatter. The building was a monument to excess, all marble columns and gold fixtures and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my entire life. Chao sat beside me in the town car, impeccable in his midnight blue suit, his expression carved from ice. He hadn't said a word during the entire drive, but I felt the tension radiating off him like heat. "Remember," he said as the car stopped, his voice low and dangerous, "you're not my maid tonight. You're my equal. My partner. Act like it." Then he stepped out, and the cameras started flashing. I took a breath, shoulders back, chin level, posture is power, and followed. The moment my heels hit the red carpet, the whispers started. I heard them even over the camera clicks, the shouted questions from reporters, the general chaos of arrival. "Is that his housekeeper? She cleans his toilets, and now she's wearing Valentino? Oh, this is going to be entertaining." Chao's hand found the small of my back, and I felt the weight of his touch like an anchor. Or a warning. We walked through the entrance together, and the massive ballroom opened up before us, a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, of faces that had launched wars and toppled governments, all turning to stare at the girl who didn't belong. A man approached us almost immediately. Late 50s, expensive suit, smile like a shark. "Wang." Finally decided to join the adults, I see. His eyes raked over me with undisguised contempt. "And who is this lovely companion?" "My wife," Chao said, his voice flat and final. "Nola Wang." The man's smile widened. "Ah. How unexpected. I don't believe we've met, Mrs. Wang. I'm Jae-sung Park." I knew Chao's late parents, God rest them, and I must say, they'd be surprised by this match. It was an insult wrapped in politeness, and everyone within earshot knew it. I felt Chao's hand tense against my back, felt him preparing to intervene. But Madame Choi's voice echoed in my head, "Your dignity that refuses to break." So I smiled. Met Park's eyes. "Surprise is often the precursor to revolution, Mr. Park. I'm sure you understand that better than most." Something dangerous flashed in his expression, but before he could respond, Chao steered me away, his hands still warm against my spine. "Well played," he murmured as we moved deeper into the lion's den. But I barely heard him, because across the ballroom, I just spotted a woman in white staring at me with eyes full of poison. Her name was Uni-san, and she was everything I wasn't: Korean, wealthy, connected, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. She glided toward us like a snake in silk, champagne flute in hand, smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Chao," she purred, completely ignoring me. "I heard the most ridiculous rumor that you'd gotten married. I told everyone it couldn't possibly be true. You're far too smart to tie yourself down." Her eyes finally slid to me, dismissive. Though I suppose desperation makes fools of us all. I felt Chao's entire body go rigid beside me, felt the ice in him turn to something colder, meaner. But before he could speak, I stepped forward. "Uni-san, is it?" I kept my voice level, warm even. "Chao's told me so much about you." Her smile faltered. "Has he?" "Oh yes. He said you're a remarkable woman. That you've built your entire identity on being exactly what men expect you to be." I tilted my head, let the words land soft and devastating. It must be exhausting, always performing, always pretending. The color drained from her face. Around us, I felt the crowd lean in, hungry for blood. "I'm not pretending anything," she hissed. "Unlike some people, I was born for this world. I belong here. You're just the help playing dress up." "You're right," I said, and watched her eyes light up with victory. "I am the help. I've spent 3 years making Chao's life run smoothly, learning every detail of his world, earning his trust through competence rather than birthright." I paused, let my smile sharpen. "Tell me, Uni-san, what have you earned? Or has everything you have been handed to you by men who see you as an interchangeable accessory?" The silence that followed was absolute. Uni-san's hand trembled, champagne sloshing dangerously in her glass. For a moment, I thought she might throw it at me. Instead, she turned on her heel and stalked away, leaving a wake of shocked whispers behind her. Chao's hand slid from my back to my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine. "That," he said quietly, "was perfect honesty, and it was magnificent." But I barely heard him, because across the ballroom, I'd just seen Jae-sung Park leaning close to another man, both of them looking at me, both of them laughing. And I realized, with a sick twist in my stomach, that this was all going exactly according to someone's plan. I discovered the bet by accident. Chao had been pulled away by a business associate, leaving me near the bar with a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. I was trying to look comfortable, shoulders back, chin level, posture as power, when I heard voices from the other side of a massive floral arrangement. 20 billion won says she doesn't last 2 hours. I'll take that action. The Wang girl's got spine. Did you see her eviscerate Uni-san? I give her until midnight. Either way, this is the best entertainment the summit's had in years. Wang bringing his maid as his wife? Brilliant. Suicidal, but brilliant. My hands went numb. Think he knows about the pool? Who cares? The whole point is to watch her crumble. These charity cases always do. They can put her in Valentino, but you can't breed class into someone. She'll say something wrong, do something embarrassing, and Wang will have to clean up the mess. Should be spectacular. I set down my champagne before I could drop it. My vision had narrowed to a pinpoint, my breath coming too fast, too shallow. I was entertainment. A joke. A pawn in some cruel game I didn't even know I was playing. 20 billion won on my humiliation. The rage that hit me was white-hot and clarifying. Because I'd spent 3 years being invisible, 3 years being overlooked and underestimated, and I told myself it was fine. Safe. But this was different. They didn't just want me to fail, they wanted to enjoy watching me break. Nola? I turned to find Chao beside me, his expression unreadable. How long had he been standing there? Had he heard? Did you know? The words came out quiet, dangerous. About the bet? Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite guilt, but close. I knew there would be speculation. 20 billion won, Chao. They're gambling on how long it takes for me to embarrass you. Then don't give them the satisfaction. His hand found my elbow again, that same steadying touch. You've already won more battles tonight than most people win in a lifetime. Don't let them see you break. But I was already breaking. Could feel the cracks spreading through the armor I'd built, through the confidence Madame Choi had tried to instill. I was the help. The invisible girl. What made me think I could ever be anything else? I need air, I managed, pulling away from him. Nala. But I was already moving, pushing through the crowd toward the terrace doors, desperate for space, for silence, for anything that wasn't the crushing weight of 100 pairs of eyes watching me, waiting for me to fail. The terrace was empty, thank God. I gripped the marble railing and stared out at Manhattan's glittering skyline, trying to remember how to breathe. Trying to remember why I'd agreed to this insanity in the first place. Behind me, I heard the door open, felt rather than saw Chao step onto the terrace. Go away, I said without turning around. No, of course not. Chao Wang didn't take orders from anyone, least of all from his maid playing dress-up. He came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him in the cool night air. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, I should have told you about the bet, he said quietly. That was unfair. I laughed, but it came out broken. Unfair? Chao, this whole thing is unfair. You asked me to be your wife for a night, to play a role I was never meant for, and I said yes because I wanted. I stopped, swallowed hard. I wanted to matter. Just for one night. I wanted to be seen. You think I don't see you? The rawness in his voice made me turn to look at him. His expression had cracked open, and what I saw there stole my breath. Not ice. Not calculation. Something vulnerable and fierce and utterly unexpected. I've seen you every day for 3 years, Nala. I've watched you move through my life like smoke, anticipating my needs before I voice them, keeping my world running with precision I can't replicate. I've watched you disappear yourself because you think being invisible keeps you safe. His hand came up, fingers barely brushing my cheek, a question more than a touch. But I see you. I've always seen you. And when I asked you to be my wife tonight, it wasn't just strategy. It was because I wanted, just once, to stand beside someone who understands what it costs to build an empire. Someone who doesn't see me as a prize to be won or a threat to be managed. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. You're terrible at admitting when something matters more than winning. His smile was brief, devastating. I know. But you matter, Nala. More than this summit. More than the deals. More than my ego. He dropped his hand, stepped back, became ice again. So here's the truth you asked for. I chose you because you're the only person in my world I trust. The only person who's earned the right to stand beside me, not behind me. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process. Could only stare at him as the enormity of his confession settled over me like snow. Now, he said, his voice steady again, controlled. You can let them win. You can hide out here, go home, let them collect their bets and laugh about the help who tried to be a queen. Or, his eyes met mine, dark and challenging. You can walk back in there and show them exactly what you're made of. I walked back into that ballroom like I owned it. Shoulders back. Chin level. Posture is power. The charity auction was in full swing, some oil painting going for an obscene amount of money, but I barely noticed. I scanned the crowd until I found him, Jae-sung Park, standing with his cluster of cronies, all of them sneaking glances at me, all of them waiting for the show. And I gave them one. I walked straight up to the auctioneer, a distinguished older man in a tuxedo who looked startled when I appeared beside him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "I'd like to make a donation." The auctioneer blinked. "Madam, the auction is for—" "I know what it's for." I pulled out the black American Express card Chao had given me. "For emergencies," he'd said, "and if this wasn't an emergency, I didn't know what was. I'm donating 50 million won to the Children's Hospital Fund. In the name of every person in this room who was told they didn't belong." The silence was deafening. "And since we're all here to show off," I continued, turning to face the crowd, finding Park's shocked expression and holding his gaze, "I have a question for Mr. Park and anyone else who placed bets tonight." I smiled, sharp and unforgiving. "How does it feel to lose?" I could have heard a pin drop. Then, from the back of the ballroom, someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by another person, then another, until half the room was applauding and the other half looked like they'd swallowed glass. Chao appeared beside me, his hand finding mine, his expression carved from ice, but his eyes were full of something that looked like pride, like admiration, like the raw, terrifying beginning of something neither of us could take back. "That," he murmured as the auctioneer scrambled to process my donation, "was the impossible move." "I learned from the best," I whispered back. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt visible, powerful, unbreakable. The aftermath came 3 days later. I'd been summoned to Chao's office, again at 2 a.m., because apparently that was when we did all our life-changing conversations, and I walked in expecting. I didn't know what. Praise, maybe. Or a debrief. Or a return to invisibility now that the summit was over. What I didn't expect was to find a contract on his desk. "What's this?" I asked, picking it up. "Your termination papers." His voice was flat, unreadable. "Effective immediately, you're no longer my housekeeper." The words hit like a slap. I'd known this was coming, had to be coming, but it still hurt. Still felt like rejection, like punishment for daring to be seen. "I see," I managed, setting the papers down with shaking hands. "Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Wang. I'll clear out my—" "Turn to page 3. I frowned but did as he said, scanning the legal jargon until I found the clause that made my breath catch. This is a partnership agreement. 51-49 split. I maintain controlling interest, but you have full autonomy over the hospitality division I'm launching." He leaned back in his chair, and for once, his expression wasn't ice. It was something warmer, something almost like hope. "You've spent 3 years running my life with more competence than most CEOs show running their companies. I'm done wasting that talent on laundry. You're offering me a business partnership. I'm offering you a choice." He stood, came around the desk, stopped just close enough that I could feel the electricity between us. "You can take the partnership and build something of your own. Or you can walk away, take the severance package on page 5, it's generous, and never look back." His eyes met mine, dark and intense. "But Nala, I'm hoping you'll stay. Not as my employee. As my equal." I should have been cautious. Should have asked 100 questions about the terms, the expectations, the boundaries. But standing there in his office with the city sprawled below us and the memory of the summit still fresh, I realized something crucial. I was done being invisible. Done apologizing for taking up space. Done letting fear dictate my worth. "I'll stay," I said. "But on one condition." His eyebrow arched. Name it. You take me to dinner. A real dinner. Not a business meeting or a strategy session or another performance for someone else's benefit. Just dinner. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, impossibly, Chao Wang smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Deal. And as I signed my name across the partnership agreement, officially ending my life as the invisible girl and beginning something new, something terrifying, something mine, I realized that the Eclipse Summit had been exactly what it promised, an eclipse. An ending of one world and the beginning of another. I'd walked into that gala as a ghost. A pawn. Entertainment for the cruelest elite. And I'd walked out as a queen. And that's how a maid became a queen, not by waiting for permission, but by refusing to break when the entire world was betting on her failure. If you loved watching Nala transform from invisible to unstoppable, smash that like button right now. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was your favorite moment from Nala's journey? Would you have had the courage to walk back into that ballroom? And where are you watching from? I want to say hello and see how far our story has traveled across the globe. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that they're more powerful than the world tells them they are. Someone who's been invisible for too long. Someone who deserves to be seen. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because we're just getting started. Next time, we've got an even more intense tale of revenge, redemption, and the kind of love that rewrites destinies. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, you are not invisible. You are not a pawn. You are power waiting to be unleashed. I'll see you in the next story. Stay fierce. Stay fearless. And never, ever let them make you small. And